Slide 1.
Great, and I will introduce the program since now we're recording. So welcome to a collaboration between the Connecticut Small Business Development Center and Workspace, which is part of the town of Manchester. We're here with Shelly Koehler, a business advisor who is running this program on business resiliency. Thank you, Shelly.
Thank you, Stacy and the Workspace for hosting this. This is Business Resiliency series, and this is part 2. Last week we did a bit of identifying critical business functions, and that's to start. And then this week is really creating that plan to minimize the impact. So feeding off of week 1 and going into week 2, we take a little bit of deeper dives and extract some more information. So as I review this week, today, this next hour, we are going to take a look at the plan to minimize the impacts and what does that look like. And we are going to start with the pandemic, but we are also going to kind of extract that, because the pandemic is not the only disaster that we need to look at. And because not that we weren't prepared, we could have never been prepared for the pandemic, but in putting this together, we can be prepared for other disasters. So that's really what I want to make sure we get into place. And what that looks like is we're going to do a business impact analysis. We are going to look at emergency responses plan, emergency response plan, emergency communication plan, and then the very end is we are going to start putting that business continuity plan together. Now, when I say business continuity, this is the whole kit and caboodle. Okay, we are doing pieces and parts of a business resiliency, which is a disaster preparedness, and as well a continuity. That's going to be all in one big folder. And it all entails continuity of a business in all scenarios. So that is going to entail today, and then there's also fill-ins as we'd had last week. So we are absolutely going to look at what, we all have insurance, and that is very important, but it doesn't reduce the impact of an event, nor does it even stop it or prepare. It is a piece of the equation, but we want to be able to create this particular plan so that you can get back quickly. And we are going to look at reopening and protect. So the next slide, please. So week 1, we identified, assess, and now we're going to plan to minimize, and that includes the continuity plan. Most of you know this. Typically after a disaster, it's very localized, and 25% of businesses do not come back. Now we're looking at global, and we're looking more at 50%. Most of us think and know we're prepared for something. Again, putting this in place will allow and prepare you for anything that happens in the future, but also is planning. I want the mindset to be planning for reopen. And so when you're going through some of these fill-in worksheets, you're going to have both of those in mind. Currently reopen, and then, okay, if I'm in a flood zone, what would happen if I'm in a flood zone? Because disasters aren't going to stop because we're in a pandemic. So that's why we're doing this kind of twofold. And as we move this series through this series, obviously we are then going to get to implementation and then recover, which is really the final phase of reopening. We'll also look at the business operations and how to best prepare for those impacts. We're going to focus on some actions to minimize disruptions and really assure safety of your employees and your assets. So learning how to create and maintain this recovery plan. Again, all of that's inside of your continuity plan. I know these are kind of sounding interchangeable. It'll make sense once you get a big folder and it starts going in layers. So, but what we're forced to look at are things a little different approach. Like I was saying, we're looking at the pandemic and reopening, but we need to also make sure we are identifying and being aware of any potential upcoming disasters so that we can make sure we have things in place. Okay, next slide. So how do we plan? How do we minimize impact? How do we evaluate? What does that look like? And it is different. I'm going to get rid of, there we go. It is different in every scenario, right? So what we are going to do is really take a look at business impact analysis, which helps you kind of look at the consequences of different disruptions to different business functions. And again, these disruptions could affect you financially, operationally, brand, marketing, imaging, and customer. So obviously going through all of these different scenarios, which a lot of people have already, you guys have already kind of experienced, will be easy when looking at the pandemic. And this is going to be a little bit more, all of it can come to play, but then once we look at different disasters, we can extract some of these other pieces because you've experienced most of them during the pandemic. There will be obviously things that are very specific to a flood or earthquake or workplace violence, but some of this stuff we can just take and pull it out and put it into another business impact analysis. And what that looks like, right, is you see the list: jobs, money, lost sales, supplies, suppliers, data. You know, maybe you have a data breach or you've lost all your data, customers. And that's another kind of bigger piece for a pandemic. How are our customers going to respond to reopening? How do we need to communicate with them? And what damage is done and how do we repair that? So all of this, again, is all part of it, and to get your mind thinking inside of the reopen, and then again the business impact analysis for other disasters. I want to touch on some other business impact analysis. These are some examples, and those are kind of pieces and parts of bigger ones. When we look at what are we going to do as far as the analysis, if you can go to the next slide. This is going to be a fillable sheet for you. And as you can see on the far left, it shoots, you put the disaster. This is somewhat similar to what you did to identify, but it's going to ask for a little different information. You know, resources impacted, recovery time. Now it's asking you to really break it down. If this happened, how long would it take you? And what does that impact? And what is the cost of that impact? So it really breaks it down. You can break it down even more. So resources impacted, machinery, and under there you could have 5 employees. So you can really break it down even more. But the disaster on the left-hand side can get as detailed as workplace violence. Could be a hazardous disaster, could be a fire, could be a medical, floods, it could be bomb threats. So there is a list that you will have to go off of, but you can also look at your industry and see what other types of disasters or impact, right, situations that can happen to you. So this will be a PDF fillable, and again, you can just keep copying it over and over. This start is obviously based on a pandemic, but you can put in anything that you need. Part of this business impact analysis will be the start of your guide, because you're going to take now each disaster and it's going to be broken down even further. And what I'm also going to give you is an emergency procedure template, where it's a 17-page document. It's going to be broken down, and we'll show this at the end, by disaster. Like, here's the information for fire. Here's the information for power outage. And it's going to have each one of these broken down so that whoever, whether it's you or whoever you appoint, to look at this and go, this is what we need to do. This is where we need to start. Here's XYZ. This is what's the impact. So now what? So, you know, moving into that, if we can go into the next slide.
Yes, Shelly, this is Stacy. I'm just curious, does anybody on this call already have a disaster plan that's this detailed? You just have to mute your mic if you want to chime in. All right, then. I guess it's good that we're
We do not. Thank you for asking.
So, and having, you know, asked that, I think, again, we're prepared for what we know. And it's really, given the day and time, right, we're trying to prepare for the unknown the best we can. And I think we've been thrown the biggest curveball that any continent that we could have been thrown. It has impacted everything, not just one area. So we have a little sight into that unknown, and that's what I'm referring to. Is if we look at this from the pandemic view and everything that it has impacted, we can then extract some of those pieces and go, oh yeah, that fits in over here. So this is not to be taken lightly, and it could take a month, 2 months, 6 months to clearly flush some of this stuff out. But it's the mindset and getting into really the different focuses to make sure that you do have the information you need and want when anything is to happen. So I digress. Coming back to a response plan. So this just kind of shows you how things move. And again, down there's the pandemic. That could be a tornado, could be a hurricane, could be earthquake, it could be fire. And then here's the levels, right? So this is just a tracking a potential pandemic. You look at the different phases, and these are pretty much all set kind of for us. This was created. I'm sure it came from somewhere, but did we ever know that we wouldn't be able to have human to human contact? Would have been, you know, kind of out of anybody's mind. So this just kind of gets you looking at the emergency or the disaster in itself and in what phase it goes through. Again, every disaster has this kind of phase planned out or labeled out. So if you could go to the next slide, I think. Yes, so the emergency response plan. So this is where you, again, take each disaster. Now, I sent you slide 6. Can you pull that up? So what I'm doing is I'm showing you a little bit more of what you see here in the fillable form, because it is a little different.
All right, just trying to get to my Word. There's so many.
No worries, no worries. So when we're looking at keeping the lights on, right, in the middle of any type of aftermath, it's really kind of key to shift away from strategies and really towards protecting, protecting employees, your assets, and what that looks like during the crisis. So this will give you an idea of each disaster. Can you just make it big? There we go. Thank you. I kind of threw this on her last minute, so my apologies. But so at the top, you can see it says emergency response plan, but in here, you see every single fire, power outage, medical, workplace, chemical, it goes through each one. You're gonna have a business impact analysis for each one of these, as well as an emergency response plan, because they're all different. How you respond to a chemical fire is completely different than a power outage. But again, some of these might be duplicatable as far as communications, which we'll see on the next page, not yet. But this is where you get the in-depth. And you might say, I'm never going to, there's not tornadoes around here. True. So we've seen a couple. We've had a couple which have never happened before. And again, you might be able to extract some of those pieces or go back in history a few years as to how people responded. What is it that they needed? Again, you want to make sure you have some type of plan, something to follow, so that you or whoever you designate, and it might be you, but if you can't respond, it's easy and organized for someone to go, okay, this is what we need to do. Maybe you're gone from the office, the building, the restaurant for that day. This needs to be absolutely handy, or someone needs to know where to find this. And if it's a fire, you need to have one off site. So there are other things, right, that'll come down the line. But this is as detailed and taken as seriously as your business, because this will make or break you in these types of situations. Those who have this already thought through on some level, maybe some adjustments need to be made or different, that's fine. At least there's a guide. And it's amazing how much this will impact whether you are open or closed after your disaster. Okay, so slide number 7. So any questions on this before we move forward, the plan? Okay. So this is the emergency communication. And again, you're going to have one of these for every, you might have a list, right, of just who you're going to contact. And then you can designate per disaster, or you can have, I would just make, how many are on there? 12 different sheets, and put the person that you want to contact. This emergency communication sheet, if you could, let's see, it's a 3-pager. And what is really critical about this is this needs to be absolutely transparent. You need to communicate this to your employees, and they need to know where to find this information. So if you go back to up to internal, you want to make sure that everybody understands what it is and how it is you want this process to go. You've already started with your general risk assessment, and then making sure that you understand the vulnerabilities. You're analyzing your operations. So this takes it all through, but now you're going to go, okay, who needs to communicate what and how? So part of this is really looking at defining who's going to do the communication, who is going to be in charge of a crisis management team, so to speak, and if you're not there, right? So there needs to be a plan A and a plan B of if I'm here and if I'm not here. And this then trickles down to an alert notification. You have that person who is there when you're not, something happens. Great. What do they do? Great. They need to alert you. They need to, I mean, in a time of crisis, some people absolutely freeze. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to act. And some people respond immediately. If everybody knows there's only one thing they need to do, and that is to go to the emergency plan. And it should be in 3 different places. You know, one in the front office, one in the back office. If you have a kitchen, there's one in there, just so people know that all they need to do, one, if it's a medical, you call 911, but anything else, they need to know the steps, and it's going to be planned out for them so they don't have to think. The only thing they have to know is to go to or find what it is they need to do. Now you're going to want to walk them through this so that they have an idea, but given crisis moments, sometimes people, you know, just need almost like a snap out of it kind of thing. Look at it, follow the steps. You don't have to think, just follow the steps. So in this communication, as you see, there was an internal and there's also an external. Obviously, the internals you want to take care of and make sure everybody is safe. You want to coordinate a check-in point. Those are all pieces and parts of that internal. Now we get, you know, to the external. Is there anybody that we need to contact right away? Again, you know, media. They're going to be there. Who's going to be speaking? You want to make sure that you have someone who is either trained or you've told them what to say. Again, this can all be in your handout and in the book. This is one of those pieces and parts where media can absolutely wreak havoc or can pull a community together. So when walking through this, just be mindful of things you have seen, how things have been done, and what it is that you want to kind of implement and make sure that happens in any type of crisis or any type of external communication. If your building's on fire and you're standing out there watching it, people are going to come up to you. But you have your they call it a little media kit. You know, here's who we're going to contact. Here's what we're going to say. And maybe it's not a whole lot until you can put something else together. So, you know, this media area is not always, it's going to be few and far between and hopefully never needed. But you want to have some type of media kit for you or whoever will be dealing with this. During the crisis, this has always been more of, I don't want to say issues, but people not knowing what to do or how to do it. So once you have all of this information, you want to share it with them. Now, you don't have to share your critical business functions and the impacts and, you know, the cost and whatnot, but the emergency response plan, emergency communication plan are absolutes for everybody in your business. You know, the contact information, you want to make sure all employees have that. How to get a hold of you. And that also is standing to let them know that, hey, I'm not going to be around. You need to contact me. So the communication between employees and employers and owners is a critical part in all of this. If you can go back to the PowerPoint. So we were talking internal, we were talking external, and during a crisis. Part of, you know, this is also a fillable, and we started it for the pandemic emergency response, because that's kind of what we're talking about. Let's start there. A lot of it you're already going to know. It will be easy to fit things in because you've already done it. So while it's fresh, let's get it down. Some other pieces you may not have, as far as, you know, the contact list. It's great that you have it, and maybe it's in your phone, but if you're not there or something happens to you, it needs to be visible and in a place where an employee, a significant other, or someone designated to take a hold of that and really make sure that that communication gets out to your distributors, suppliers, customers. You know, again, here's where the media part comes in. Facebook, social media, how is all that going to be handled? So I know there's a lot to think about, but if you take this one step at a time, like the identifying, that is going to absolutely thwart kind of what is priority. And then you start creating from there. You want to take what is the most probable disasters for your industry and for your business and work down from there. But again, I think starting with this pandemic, because a lot of it can be extracted from there, do that. You know, again, keep it simple. This will be fillable. And you want to make sure that it is legible and organized. I think that will be the other critical piece. So a couple key points, and I kind of ran through some of this really quickly because I wanted to leave more time for questions, and like, because some of this does collapse together, and feedback is always good. There are interchangeable words, but when it all comes together, it'll all make sense. So the 3-page, which this is the emergency communication plan, it is 3 pages, and it covers crisis team management, social networking platforms. It goes from media to all the way during the crisis, and it just gives you explicit information. And I took myself off camera. Can everybody see me? Because I don't know if I can. Well, let's see. How do I?
You're on camera.
Okay, because I can't see anybody. So I'm just, because I wanted to see my whole screen. Okay, so on the 3-page business emergency communication plan, it gives you, again, fillable areas through here. It'll give it all to you, so all you have to do is fill it in. And then very simple, but again, it takes time and just the thought process of how you want to do that. And it also gives, again, it goes after the crisis, during the crisis, internal and external. So that will be one of the key components. And I'd have to say, if nothing else, your emergency response plan and your emergency communication plan are 2 of the most critical pieces, because this is what you are going to need in order to communicate with your staff, employees, suppliers, as well as how it is to respond. So those are really 2 of the critical components. Again, different for every disaster, but yet, again, you can extract some of those out of each different disaster and will be, what do I want to call, very pliable to the next.
I would think, Shelly, that it's important after we do it that we save printed physical copies, because the internet could completely be out. We won't have access to any of the digital documents.
So thank you for leading into that. So if you can go to the last slide. So this is what all the things you're doing will go into the business continuity plan. Your business impact analysis, your response plan, your communication plan, all of these lead up to a working business continuity plan and business functions after the disaster. This is what we ultimately want to get to is, okay, we have identified areas, we have the plan, we have things in place. Now, next week is how do we implement those? What does that look like? And how do we move into the next phase of, new resources? What do we need to look at? And again, we're going to reopen. How do we do that? So that's implementing a lot of what we're talking about. So setting this groundwork is important because implementation will change when this changes. So, and that's going to happen. But if we have most of what we need in these first two pieces, and we've really taken the time and thought it through, and again, there's going to be a business critical function that comes down tomorrow. You're like, oh, why didn't I think about that? You just put it in there. And then you add to these other pieces if necessary. So it's one of those that it can be fluid. But right now, I think we're going to have the most information given the pandemic that we could ever possibly have out of a disaster. So really taking a look at that, and we'll all filter down into the respective other disasters that you walk through on these plans, on these fillable areas. So what I want you to think about when doing these is, again, prioritizing. If I know I'm in a flood zone, then I definitely want to make sure that I walk through the process to do the flood disaster. Think about those ones, right? And the identifying that you did last week, those should absolutely show you the probabilities of what disaster is most likely to happen to you. But as Stacy pointed out, you want to make sure that you have, one, a printed copy, two, one on a flash drive, maybe two on a flash drive, one on your computer, and then one is in your safety lockbox, maybe one's at home, because if something were to happen to the business itself, and God forbid a fire and everything, the computers, the book, whatever you have this somewhere. It could be that you give it to a family member, or you want to make sure that you have access to it, and it's in several different places. Just as we were told way back when in CDs, right? Put one in your safety deposit box and give one to a friend. Put it in your firebox. You want to do the same thing here. So looking at all this, and I'm gonna pull up, so continuity plan. You see the disaster power outage sheet. You're gonna get that fillable. The supplier name, resources provided. This was the identifier last week. All these are gonna go into your business continuity plan, and what that looks like is, if you have a pen and paper, you'll want to get, here's a couple items. You'll want to get a 2-inch binder. And if you are a manufacturing company, you'll want to get a 3-inch binder. I'm not joking. And you'll want to get at least 12 to 24 tabs. So again, for as many disasters, emergency response area, you're going to have emergency procedure area. You can put other things in that binder as well that pertain to the business and employees, so forth and so on. So you'll want to have those tabs, and you'll obviously separate the different sections with those tabs. Now, your first series, last week, identifying, this will be the first thing to go in there. Now, you can stick it in the pocket for now. Once you get part 2 done, which is today, you're going to have a lot more to put in there and a lot more to save in your file on your computer. But this will start building itself. But to stay organized is key. Again, if you only have part of it done, the parts that you do have, you want to make sure people can get to and people know where they are. Again, the response and the communication. Those plans are absolutely critical because those are the ones that are going to filter down to your employees. So now if you'll pull up that emergency procedure template for me. And I wanted to walk through this because this is kind of what it's going to look like. It's 17 pages. And this is what we use and how we help people. We walk them through. We will insert the company name, all of that you will be able to do, and the date that you created it, because you might update it 6 months from now with new employee names. It could be different distributors, all of that. I know I've seen several of these that have been done, and it works. People just crossing out. You know, if it's a different supplier, they cross it out, and you put the new supplier number in and name. Once you have enough of that, you can go in and update that page and put in a new one. But as long as you update it, and then again, you cross out the date and you put the new date so that people, you know, and anybody who gets a hold of it knows when this was last updated. That makes it kind of a critical piece. So this goes through emergency introductions. It just, again, keeps details of types of incidents covered. And these particular pieces should be kept confidential because you're going to extract some of this information out, again, to go into your communication plan as well as your response plan. But some of this information you may not want to share. And if you don't care, then that's fine. Some of the notes, right? The procedures, OSHA, action plans, minimum requirements, it gets into this information. And again, this is more from a standpoint of, okay, I've identified these, I've taken into consideration, but if I'm an employee, how do I report a fire? I call 911, do I call my boss? You know, a mind goes blank. So then this is what I really want you guys to focus on and look at, and it might bring about some information that you hadn't thought about. It really goes through every kind of emergency or a disaster. So yeah, this is information and links, but it gets into chemical spills and chemical fires. You know, it goes into power outages and, you know, walks you through what you need to fill in. Floods, water damage, again, medical emergencies. You know, it gets even deeper. So it keeps going. Earthquakes. Again, it gives you information. I know she's going a little fast, but you're going to get this. You know, bomb or explosion. Who sees that on a daily basis? It's like a pandemic, right? We've had more of that than we have a pandemic, but even so, right? You'd never think it's going to happen to you. A fire, maybe it's not in your place, but it's in someone else's, or it is in your place. Now, how do you approach that? So this is just a great resource. It gets into workplace violence on how to handle all of that. It gets into, I'm kind of ahead of her. So suspicious objects, how do you handle all that? I mean, see something, say something. Some people will just walk up to it and open it. Biohazards, if you have chemicals, so forth and so on. Again, you can identify these as a, you know, what's the probability and what's the impact? You know, I'd take your top 5 or 6 and go with them. You know, if you have nothing to do with biohazards, your music shop. Nothing's biohazard unless you are making and varnishing and doing things with that, those chemicals, right? This one is kind of key, and this should be part of something you take out and make sure your employees know. An evacuation procedure. In buildings and whatnot, there's always a route. Employees need to know which way, in case of a fire. If it's over here, you go here. Again, we can never assume that people know these things unless you teach them and show them, and then have something written where they can actually see it on a daily basis. Okay, if the alarm goes off, I know. So, you know, it sounds really crazy, because I remember doing these kinds of, you know, drills when we were in school, you know, in case of, and now I look back, it's like, we didn't take those seriously. It was nothing whoop-de-doo. Nowadays, you know, with all the unfortunate things that are happening and school shootings, and like, this is becoming something that we absolutely have to educate and make sure everybody knows. It is a liability as a business owner. Again, here's, you know, person with a weapon. We're seeing more of that, but you need to know how to react, and they need to know how to react. You know, they need to know and be guided on what to say. If they're going to freeze, and it absolutely needs to be relayed, so that they can understand. Not to throw them into fear, but it's something that's going to happen. Now, that assembly is, if you're in manufacturing, or if you have any other areas, you can put this here, map of your office, those kinds of pieces and parts. Where are we all going to meet? And if we all don't meet there, where's a check-in? You know, call, do we, you know, so those are the kinds of things you want to have in place. So again, this is a 17-page guide template for you. You will get this as well. That will kind of help you walk through some of these disasters. And again, this is not all of them. This is just a few that have been identified in different areas of the US. And you might have some that are a little bit more specific and focused on your industry. So with that, I'm open for questions, and I am trying to get back so I can see people.
This is Stacy. I just want to say our fire marshal showed us a version of this document, and it really is overwhelming. But if you sit with either a member of your staff, or even a colleague who's a friend of yours in a different business, and you guys just do them side by side and talk out some things, it makes it a little bit easier and less burdensome to talk it out through the processes. And it really is important to have a printed document in case, you know, the next virus we get is viral, and we don't have access to any of our computer billing, customer emails, addresses, phone numbers, things like that.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those where, again, I think this really has, the pandemic has really, we've got to learn from it. And that'll be the biggest mistake if we don't take something from this. There's always good that comes out of bad. You know, we can be sitting in fear, or we can, you know, at least be prepared for what's coming, or what might be next, if it happens again. Now, you know, I never like to think that this is going to happen again, but with what the health experts are saying, we could see a resurgence of this if we don't stay in place. Now, that's going to be hard to keep a lot of people down, but I know that we're trying to, the state and the New England collaborative states are looking how we can do this slowly and making sure that our economy doesn't crash. Our small businesses can get back. You know, kids can still go to, you know, summer camp. They can still go to the theater. They can, you know, get lessons. So I think being able to adapt is really only going to strengthen someone's business. Being able to really look and see what's being given now, how can I make this work? Those businesses who do that are absolutely going to survive, and they will thrive. And just note that things are probably never going to be the same as they were. Some parts might be, but a new norm, we're going to be juggling more than we used to. We're going to be doing the online. And then when we can, we will be doing the in-person. Some people aren't going to want to have that, you know, human, you know, face-to-face anymore. So we've got to think of how it is we can manage that. Do we just do one and not the other anymore? So these are the adjustments, and being able to adapt is one of the most critical pieces of being able to survive and then thrive when you reopen.
It's really very, very informative, and it'll be even more informative when everyone gets the actual documents and looks them up. But before we wrap up, does anybody have any questions?
I have one question. First of all,
Great.
thank you so much for all this homework. I was just wondering what I was going to do for the rest of the week. So thank you.
You got that.
You touched on this just briefly at the beginning about business interruption insurance. Did you mention that, or is that such a thing that we can use at this time?
So it's a two-part question. Yes, there is business interruption insurance, and it is important to have, but certain things that having insurance doesn't do is really reduce or even stop any type of disasters from happening. That's where all this comes into play. Now, business interruption insurance can be very important to have. But while in the very fine print, everybody has noticed, and this probably would have put the insurance companies out of business. I believe it said, does not include viruses. So that squashed everybody who was impacted by the pandemic. Now, if you were to have business interruption, loss in sales for flood, for earthquake, or for the building, yes, that is absolutely critical. I had a restaurant who leased out the bottom floor of a building and was shut down for 2 weeks because of a flood from upstairs. Now that's loss of sales. So in that scenario, what the insurance company was able to do is they looked at their previous year, their previous sales, because it was kind of a seasonal, and they were able to get loss of sales for those 2 months that they were down as they were repairing.
So then if it were to be approached not from a virus cause, but by the state has shut us down, is that an option? Or
No, because then you link it back to why did they shut you down?
Okay, just being hopeful. Thank you.
No, believe me, I think every lawyer has looked at that sideways and upside down. And, you know, a virus is a virus, and they obviously, they looked at what would shut us down.
Okay.
What would take this insurance company and wipe it out? And what it would be a pandemic. What creates a pandemic? The only thing that we've known is a virus. Yeah. But very good question, because that just, you know, it tells you what they're looking at. You know, like what is it that's going to shut you down, and how do you protect it? What do you do? So, and that might be business interruption insurance. Anything else?
When and how will the PDF of your slides be available, or basically the PDF of the planning documents that you put together be available for people?
I'll send those out when we're done here via email.
Okay.
Did you get round one? Well, you didn't register through our website.
Right.
So, I'm sorry. So
I'm registered now.
yeah, my bad. I forgot
okay.
about that. Those who are registered on our website, I send them right after the, sorry, I don't know why I can't speak today, right after the webinar. For those who are not registered, I will send those separately.
And is it something that I could share with our business, or should that be coming directly from you?
That should be coming directly from me. Yeah. But you can absolutely show them, say, here's what you're going to create.
Mm-hmm. So how would someone, they would need to register, how could they get those documents if they wanted to, if they haven't attended or attended and registered on the website? What do they have to do?
They would need to become a client.
Mm-hmm. So they have to register.
Register as a client. And I think in order to get on this webinar, you had to register as a client.
Yes, you did.
If in fact you want more than this training, then just reach out to me and we will switch you over to counseling, which then opens up the gate for one-on-one, and to walk you through this on a one-on-one, or kind of go back and forth as to what is specific and focused for you and your industry.
Okay.
So yeah, so becoming a client. And if you're in the Manchester or Glastonbury, from Enfield to Meriden, kind of a little hockey stick, those are my areas. Otherwise, there's other colleagues that will absolutely assist you. If you register and you're looking for something like this, and it's not related to COVID, this is training, please specify that, because we have hired some new advisors that are specifically advising for COVID. So there's just that line. Doesn't matter, just letting you know.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Super.
Hi.
One last question before we move on.
Hi, this is Edwin Brown. Thanks for the presentation. I just realized that I did not do my homework from last week, so I apologize.
That's
I've been
okay.
so busy with everything. Could you remind me the email that you sent those PDF documents?
So you were on last week, so it's
Yes.
whatever email I have of yours.
No, I'm sorry. What was it, from your email, or was it from an email from the SBDC?
Probably came from the SBDC.
Okay.
Yeah, it came because I went, yes. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And if you don't have them, let me know and I'll resend them, Ed.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.
Great. So on behalf of Workspace and the town of Manchester, Tana also works for the town of Manchester, specifically with the downtown district. Gary Anderson is the head of planning and economic development, working with every business in Manchester. We're all here as resources for you and connecting you to local, meaning Manchester, opportunities, as well as the state of Connecticut. And of course, Shelly's connection with SBA is national, federal. So just let us know if we don't have an answer. We'll try to get you to the right person. Anything else, Shelly?
I just want to thank everybody for taking your time, and feel free to reach out. This can be overwhelming. Just take it one thing at a time, and you'll get there. And again, get that binder. And maybe it's only an inch right now, but get it and keep it organized. Just put it all in there.
Excellent. And
Thank
the
you.
Manchester Chamber of Commerce is also doing programs, so check out their website and social media, and let us know if you have any questions. Have a great day, and thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
Everybody be safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.